AI companies are buying and destroying millions of printed books on purpose. Not just modern books, but old, obscure, and in some cases potentially rare titles. And they are doing it at industrial scale. This is not a rumor from social media. Court documents, vendor reports, and investigative journalism all point to the same underlying reality. Physical books are being purchased in bulk, cut apart, scanned, and turned into training data for artificial intelligence systems. At the center of the most documented case is Anthropic, the company behind the AI model, Claude. Internal materials tied to a project called Project Panama describe an effort to destructively scan all the books in the world. The process involves buying physical books, slicing off their bindings, scanning every page, and recycling what remains. The goal is not preservation, it is data extraction. And the scale is not small. We are talking about millions of books and tens of millions of dollars in purchasing and logistics. What makes this story more than just a strange industrial footnote is the legal structure around it. In court proceedings, judges drew a sharp distinction between pirated digital libraries and legally purchased physical books. Downloading millions of pirated books was treated as a serious violation, but buying a physical book and replacing it with a single internal digital copy was viewed far more leniently under fair use arguments. That creates a strange incentive. In some interpretations of the law, destroying a legally purchased book after scanning it is not just allowed, it may actually strengthen the legal position of the company, because it ensures there is no extra copy floating around. One book in, one digital version out. Clean replacement. So the system does not just permit this workflow, it may unintentionally reward it. To understand why any of this is happening, you have to understand what AI companies are actually building. ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are large language models. They are trained on enormous amounts of text so they can generate human-like writing. But they do not know things in the way humans do. They learn patterns in language by processing vast data sets and predicting what word should come next in a sentence. The quality of these systems depends heavily on the quality of the text they are trained on. And that is where the internet becomes a problem. The internet is huge, but it is messy. It contains high-quality writing, but also endless repetition, spam, low-effort content, SEO filler, and increasingly, AI-generated text. If you train a model on too much of that, you risk teaching it to reproduce noise instead of knowledge. Books, by contrast, are different. They are edited, structured, and often written over long periods of time. They contain sustained arguments, coherent narratives, and carefully developed explanations. In other words, they are dense, high-quality examples of human language. That makes them extremely valuable for training AI systems. For years, companies relied on digital sources, licensed books, public domain works, and large datasets scraped or compiled from the internet. But a significant portion of widely used training data also came from unofficial shadow libraries, like LibGen, which host millions of pirated books. That created a legal problem. Authors began suing AI companies, arguing that their copyrighted books had been used without permission to build commercial systems. One major case against Anthropic revealed that the company had downloaded millions of pirated books from these shadow libraries. Eventually, Anthropic agreed to a settlement worth at least $1.5 billion, covering hundreds of thousands of works. But alongside that legal battle, something else was happening. Instead of relying on pirated digital libraries, Anthropic began acquiring physical books directly. This is where Project Panama comes in. According to court documents, the company spent tens of millions of dollars buying books in bulk from large used book distributors. The books were then sent to industrial scanning facilities where they were physically dismantled and digitized at scale. The process is called destructive scanning. The name sounds dramatic, but the logic is simple. A bound book is slow and expensive to scan page by page. So instead, the spine is cut, the pages are separated, and the book is fed through high-speed scanners like loose paper. Once that happens, the original book is effectively gone. The scanned pages are then converted into machine-readable text using optical character recognition, allowing computers to process the words directly. From a technical perspective, this is efficient. From a physical perspective, it is irreversible. And that is where the controversy begins. Supporters of the practice argue that a book is primarily its text. If the words are preserved digitally, then nothing meaningful is lost. The physical object is just a container. Critics argue the opposite. A book is not just words. It is also an object with history. It can contain marginal notes, inscriptions, printing variations, or simply exist as one of a very small number of surviving copies. Once it is destroyed, that physical record is gone forever. Even when a book is not rare, the concern is scale. When millions of books are processed, the risk of destroying something culturally or historically significant increases simply because no one is carefully evaluating each individual copy. And that leads to the next development in the story. Recent reporting suggests that companies and intermediaries are now actively building supply chains for physical books specifically for AI training. One such service, reported by 404 Media, described the ability to source anywhere from thousands to potentially 1 million books in bulk for undisclosed AI clients. These services rely on ISBN databases and large-scale coordination across used book markets. They also often operate under strict confidentiality agreements, meaning the identity of the final buyer is not disclosed. In other words, books are being treated less like cultural objects and more like raw material. But it is important to separate what is confirmed from what is assumed. We know that at least one major AI company has purchased and destructively scanned millions of books. We know that large-scale book sourcing services are being marketed to AI companies. We also know that authors are actively suing over the use of copyrighted material in AI training. What we do not know is the full extent of which companies are doing what or how many books are being processed across the industry as a whole. Claims that all AI companies are systematically destroying rare books are not supported by direct evidence. The strongest documented case remains Anthropic's operation. The more accurate concern is not that priceless manuscripts are being shredded en masse, but that large volumes of ordinary, out-of-print, or poorly cataloged books are being processed without much transparency. And that raises a deeper question. Why now? Part of the answer is data. AI systems improve when they are trained on more and better text. But the internet is increasingly saturated with low-quality or AI-generated content. Researchers sometimes refer to this as AI slop, mass-produced, repetitive, or low-value text that can degrade model quality if used at scale. There is also a theoretical concern known as model collapse, where systems trained repeatedly on synthetic or low-quality data begin to lose diversity and accuracy over time. Because of this, older human-written books have become more valuable. They represent a large, relatively clean dataset of language produced before the AI era. There is also a legal dimension. Under US copyright law, buying a physical book gives you ownership of that object. You can resell it, lend it, or destroy it. But you do not own the copyright itself. In the Anthropic case, the court treated different data sources differently. Pirated digital libraries were treated as a clear legal violation. But converting legally purchased physical books into internal digital copies was treated more leniently under fair use arguments, especially when the original book was destroyed and not duplicated. This creates a subtle but important incentive structure. If a company keeps both the physical book and a digital copy, it may look like duplication. If it destroys the physical book, it can argue it is simply replacing one format with another. That is where the paradox emerges. The law does not explicitly require destruction, but in practice, destruction can simplify the legal argument. So what looks like an industrial scanning process is also shaped by legal risk management. The result is a system where physical books are being converted into training data under a mix of technical efficiency, legal ambiguity, and commercial demand. Is this a cultural disaster, or just large-scale digitization with uncomfortable side effects? The answer is somewhere in between. On one hand, scanning books can preserve access to texts that might otherwise be lost or forgotten. On the other hand, the process removes physical objects from circulation and places their contents inside private systems that the public cannot see or access. And that is the core tension. This is not about AI companies hating books. It is the opposite. They value books so highly that they are willing to build entire supply chains to acquire them. But that value is not cultural in the traditional sense. It is computational. Books are being treated as high-quality language fuel for machines, and that shift changes what a book is in the modern economy. A book is no longer just something you read. It is something that can be extracted, converted, and absorbed into systems that generate new text at scale. And once that process begins, the physical object becomes less important than the data it contains. That is the quiet transformation at the heart of this story. Not the destruction of books for its own sake, but the conversion of books into something else entirely.